Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So, for the second time in basically a week, a Nintendo game has been made better by fans. That's because a modder named Marco Blado basically took Mole Mania and modded the entire thing into Mole Mania DX. If you're not familiar with the game, it's one of those Nintendo games absolutely perfect in its execution, but people basically just completely forget about it. And it was an original Game Boy game as well, so it's always lived its life in black and white. But the modder here basically went in and made an entirely new version of the game by adding color, and I will say their color palette and overall selection absolutely spectacular. I'm still not quite sure how the mole, who wears glasses just like Ray Charles and is clearly blind in the game, managed to read this note in the first place. But I guess I really shouldn't worry about story continuity and it making sense and plot holes when you're playing as an anthropomorphic mole that is actually able to be controlled by a Game Boy. All jokes aside, this game is just straight up fun. It is a perfect puzzler, and now it's going to be even better. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But the premise of Mole Mania is super simple to pick up, but very difficult to master because these levels get needlessly complex in all the best ways later on in the game. And every single board, and it basically is almost single screen, is going to have both a top layer or the ground, and then because you are a mole, you can burrow into the earth and basically change things up. And moving back to the original version of the game, you can see the night and day difference, pun very much intended for a blind mole, between the color version of the game and black and white. But I'm not saying that the black and white version isn't amazing in its own right. I love the inky blacks and everything else about this, but there's something about it being in color that really just does modernize it and make it that much more fun and that much more modern. And like I said, for some strange reason, this is just a game that I never hear mentioned whatsoever, probably because Nintendo really didn't do much with this franchise. I would love to see a new Mole Mania game today, especially when they have that Virtual Boy kind of fake attachment coming out for Switch 2. Remake this game, give us a sequel, play around with maybe some depth perception. I would love to see stuff like that actually happen, but obviously there's at least one fan of this game enough out there to decide that they would make the entire thing in color as Mole Mania DX. And when you are coloring something, you basically have to kind of guess to yourself, what do you think it would look like? There is no real key or legend here is to say what color should be what, outside of the fact that you can tell what's grass, what's cobblestone, and what is dirt, but everything else in the game is absolutely open to interpretation. So if you pick the wrong colors, you could end up with a very garish looking kind of game right here, and if you pick the right colors, you have something that absolutely just sings on the screen. It looks great either on real Game Boy hardware, which it does run on, or software emulation, or even MiSTer FPGA if you want to play it that way. As we move back to the black and white stars, you let me know, are you digging the black and white, or are you digging the actual color version? And that was a very big pun for moles digging around the ground. I do like a dad joke now and then when I can fit them in. But honestly, you can't go wrong in either direction, but there is something about the color that just makes this game feel a little bit fresher and a little bit newer. Because I totally get, if you didn't grow up in the black and white Game Boy era, sometimes going back to some of these games can make people not be that into them. Now I totally understand that most of my audience, at least if the demographics are correct, you probably did grow up in the black and white Game Boy era, but a lot of you actually did, and about 30% of you would have been alive a little bit later than that. So stuff like this definitely helps these games see a fresh new audience as well, because again, these are going to show up in the news, people are going to write articles and do videos about Mole Mania DX, and then some people that maybe never played a Game Boy or Game Boy Color in their life, started at Game Boy Advance, is going to see that article, think that game looks pretty legit, and then decide to play from there. And that's why these modifications are so important, not just because you suddenly get one of Nintendo's best hidden gem games in color, but also because a lot of other people are going to learn that this game is a hidden gem in the first place. If anything, this kind of feels like a super precursor to something like Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, except for the fact that obviously we're playing as a mole, not as a toad. And sometimes you can actually just kind of cheese the game as well and try to break the cycles, but I wasn't able to succeed here, because if you dig it just the right time, you can get under the ground before you actually get hit by whatever the hell that thing is there that is trying to beat you up. I guess some sort of walking duck. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me what you think that is. Also could be a bullet bill on legs that's walking around. But it's soundtrack sample time because this music is addictive. 45 seconds. I'll be right back and talk more about the color process. Enjoyed that song being stuck in your head for the rest of the day, because I can assure you it's going to be stuck exactly there in mine. As we move back over to the black and white version, you have to think when you're dealing in black and white versus color, you're kind of dealing in contrast to have that shading versus allowing for all the color to be on the screen at any one time. And don't forget, it's not like the modder here can pick any number of colors. It is still Game Boy hardware, which means you are limited to the amount of colors on screen at any given point in time. And that's something that I deal with in my normal work process as well as a filmmaker. Not so much how many colors I can use, but what colors are the appropriate colors to use when I'm working on something narrative or even commercial, because that is something that you definitely consider. And I've actually shot a lot of black and white Super 16mm film stock back in the day, and when you're dealing in black and white with those shades of gray and the contrast is a completely different type of science and a completely different type of vibe that you're going for. So doing something like colorizing Mole Mania does take that same skill set and that same level of attention to detail, except in this instance you're just not hoping that you don't blow off a 400-foot mag of Super 16mm film, because it is expensive as hell. Where modding this thing is time expensive, but at least expense free. But my entire point about this is these color selections just seem so natural and so Game Boy Color like. I love the green here, I love the little bits of blue on the grass, and you can see they almost feel like close to the same blue that the dinosaurs have running around. You have the pink flowers here, and of course that big steel ball you've been pushing the entirety of the game in black and white should stay black as well, because it's basically just some sort of black cannonball for lack of a better term. If we go into the next area, but we go back to it in black and white, you can see here the contrast is good, but you don't really get that same sensation of just that color pop that we do on DX. Now if we go from the black and white version of the game right back to the same area but in color, I love that the heart is obviously red, but this just has such a vibrancy and saturation to it that it looks great on a modern Game Boy screen, but it especially looks good on my LG C4 OLED. All of these colors just absolutely pop, although in that instance as well the black and white version looks spectacular, because obviously on an OLED those blacks are just basically going to be inky black. It isn't some sort of backlight sort of situation going on. But as we dig through the ground here, the other thing that I haven't been focusing on as much is this game is absolutely an outstanding puzzle game. It'll break your brain and make you bend your thinking into ways you never thought possible by playing a small game featuring a mole, but that's where a lot of the fun is in this one. And for somebody who's a little bit uncoordinated and lacks spatial awareness in their real life if they're not on skis, maybe even harder for me. But one more soundtrack sample, because damn it, I'm getting this song stuck in your head, and I'll be right back with just a little bit more. So why did I make you listen to the same soundtrack sample twice? That's because I'm being a little bit of an asshole here, and I'm really trying to get that song stuck in your head. Because just like Daytona USA or other games, when I hear the soundtrack of Mole Mania, it's something that I'm going to be humming subconsciously to myself for the next 48 hours, and now hopefully you are too. But as far as Nintendo games that don't get near as much acclaim as they deserve, Mole Mania is probably at the top of the list. It is a fun little game. It's pick up and play. You can grab it on an analog pocket if you got that, MiSTer FPGA, software emulation, even real Game Boy hardware with a flash cart. But this is the type of game you think you're going to sit down and play for 10 minutes, and then suddenly an hour and a half have gone by and you've gotten yourself stuck just trying to figure out one of the puzzles, and that is a sign of a great game. And now it's going to have 100% more color, because obviously the original was just black and white. So as far as a successful mod is concerned, it does exactly what it needs and nothing different. It leaves the gameplay intact, because I would say there's nothing there you could improve, and it just gives a situation color where it used to be in black and white. And I think when you combine those two things together, you just have a recipe for a really special thing. The modder did exactly enough to make it feel modern, but didn't go so far in a heavy hand to make it feel like they were trying to put their own stamp on it. And that's kind of what you want to do, especially in colorization, which is actually its own art form. You want to basically make it seem like that's how it was in the first place, and that you haven't made any choices. So when you see colorized footage and it looks very natural, just realize that it took somebody a lot of time to do that, just like it did here in Mole Mania DX. Link to be able to mod the ROM is down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.